podcast, Peeragogy In Action number 10, Challenging Conversations. And it's connected with the Peeragogy project, in which we're building a no longer missing guide, because we're building it to all things relevant to successful peer learning and peer production. In the podcast, we create an interactive space where participants and audience can explore philosophies, concepts, contributors, and practical applications of peeragogy. If you're watching this live, you know it's live streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you can subscribe with all of your podcast apps for the audio part. So yeah, today's session is with Judith, Venom, and Richard Butler. I hope they're both on. I see them, they're both there. That's fantastic. So I know Judith through Open Global Mind, which is an online community. She has other affiliations, which I'll let her introduce a little bit about what she does and how that's relevant to this area. Richard works with the City of Pittsburgh, and Robert Morris University, and I will let him also introduce how he happens to be here on this conversation about difficult conversations. So there's their profiles. Why don't we go in the order just named, if that's okay, to Judith and then Richard to say a little bit about how you happen to be on this podcast. And Richard, I know you know Charlotte, so that's part of the story there too. So, but let's have Judith's story about this podcast in the first place.
Well, I met Charlotte through the Open Global Minds community, which is a virtual community of folks all over the world trying to make the world a better place and doing it collectively and using technology. I've had a lot of background in professional and nonprofit associations and in a variety of leadership roles. The American Chemical Society, which is a professional organization of about 150,000 worldwide, and leadership team and support of directors and so forth. I just love working with people, and in the course of a 30-year career in a corporate enterprise as well, I've had a variety of these different locations to learn about communication and what works with people, or some of the things at least that work. So that's my interest area.
That sounds really cool. We'll get more into what works and maybe also a little bit of what doesn't work, what could work better. So Richard, tell us a bit about yourself, how you happen to be here, and yeah, how do you think about difficult conversations? What comes to mind?
Great. Thanks for having me here for starters. And I always love a good conversation. I met Charlotte through my work with U.S. Rowing as the co-chair for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I'm also, for the last 18 years, have been a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And through that work, guess what? I have difficult conversations every single day. Anytime that we're talking about race in America, there's going to be a very challenging conversation. And I found a way to be able to be heard and learned how to listen. So I think this is going to be a fascinating topic today.
That is super exciting. And I think, yeah, both of you have been involved in diversity efforts. I know that's an interest of Judith in some of her current work. And it seems like that's something that's very much in the consciousness of, America and the world right now. I just actually at work, I live in England, but we were watching a unconscious bias training video, which everyone has to watch. Everyone has to watch this video at the university. So I'm not saying unconscious bias is going to solve all of our problems. I believe that's probably another interesting conversation. But I think, yeah, bringing this stuff into the themes that we deal with every day is really going to be very useful. So I think we say, and for example, just last week or last month, I was having this interesting and very challenging conversation, which brings us to the first topic that we have on slides. So Charlotte, whose name has come up a lot, Charlotte Pierce is our producer, has these great slides, and they give us a little bit of a timetable of things to discuss. But don't feel bad if we stray a bit away from it. So the first question we were going to talk about is, when should we bring up a challenging topic in a collaborative group? So, like right now, we had to deal a little bit with Judith's connection. I think it's good. I think it's stable. But are there other things like, when should we bring it up? Do you have to get to know people first before you bring up something challenging? Let's go in the opposite order. Let's go Richard, Judith this time, and then does this question prompt a thought about when?
Yeah, thanks for that challenging question.
Mm,
about challenging collaborative conversations. I think it begins on a personal level of what is your relationship in that conversation. And so if I am bought in as a facilitator in a conversation and I know my audience, then I'm going to call the people in. I never call them out, I always call them in immediately at that point. If it's something that could create could cause a person or a group to ball up their fist and want to fight, and
mm,
then I like to call them in a little later. So not to
mm.
embarrass them, not to have them be defensive, but to weave it in. I'll call them in still in the discussion, but I might weave it in a different way versus just calling them out.
That makes sense. I will not respond back and forth every time. I'll just say pass the baton to Judith, and for efficiency, I can respond maybe to both of you together, and of course you can respond to each other. So, but let's get Judith's views on this when question.
Well, I really like the answer that Richard gave because it's a when and a how. And I
Mm,
think the when is maybe, first of all, are you feeling really uncomfortable with the conversation? And is it important enough to you that you want to try to do something to alter the course of the conversation? I think in group dynamics, um, there should be guidelines ahead of time so that you have a sense of the community's commitment to creative and good discourse without unreasonable interruptions and continuances. I think that the easiest way to draw people in is to actually literally draw them in and say, time out, I need a little more background, or can you tell me more about this position, or something like that. Um, it's a different dynamic. And I think I loved the comment of calling them in instead of out because confrontation is not usually helpful.
so this is where I wanted to share one personal update from this morning, which is I had a headache this morning, and I thought, I'm going to go to this conversation about difficult conversations, and I'm going to have a headache. So don't worry, my headache is massively reduced. But I feel like my insight from that was that you have to be in a pretty good place to have a good conversation. If you're coming, as you said earlier, Richard, if someone's coming ready to fight, well, it'd be really bad if you were, as the facilitator, coming, I think, to fight, because I don't think you're going to facilitate anything but a multi-sided argument with a bunch of people. On the other hand, maybe not. So how do you personally prepare yourself to be that person who shows up and facilitates the conversation? Because I know we were chatting before in some of our warm-up conversations about the role of the facilitator. How do you prepare for that role?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe, and I like your response, Judith. We both said the same thing in a different way, and that's great. That's what diversity is. um, yeah, so being prepared for me, just knowing the content, and sometimes knowing the too much content will actually have us not say too much. So knowing just the right amount of content to be able to maybe not be the expert at that moment, but dang on close to being the expert at that moment. And being that almost expert creates trust within the conversation that people are willing to actually listen to what I have to say. I recently facilitated a 550 person diversity workshop, and a person came off mute because she was sick and tired of hearing about the Black lived experience. And she said, why doesn't all lives matter? Why can't I say Asian lives matter? And so I gave her the space with these 540 other people who started blowing up the chat.
Wow.
And after she had her say, I said, and so I'm going to agree with you that all lives matter, but can we agree that not all lives are equal? And that made her trust me. She was okay with that. She agreed with that. And we were able to continue this 2-hour conversation.
So that sounds like it's an example of your ability to kind of hold the moment. She was ready to call other people out. She was ready to have a fight probably with 500 right. people simultaneously. And you create a space where you could actually call her in and you dissolve that tension. But it sounds like it was largely because you listened to her and you thought about it.
We have to, even if we disagree, I believe that and especially in conversations, we're going to disagree, but you need to allow the person to have a brave, safe space to disagree,
Yeah, that's
to be heard,
interesting.
to be
That's
heard.
interesting. I know that I've had some experiences in some of the same online communities as Judith, where they try to create that. It occurs to me that it's difficult to create that space online. Of course, it doesn't necessarily easier to create that space offline. I'm not quite sure. I wonder, Judith, because I know you as an online person. Or let's say, Judith is off the frame. Okay, well, Judith's off the frame, so I'll go to you, Richard, with the same question, I guess, which is, do you think it's easier to do this online or offline? Because, again, with this issue of the unconscious mind and stuff, I have a little bit of suspicion about the unconscious bias things I just watched in the afternoon, because it's like, I did a lot of therapy, and I think like the world of the unconscious is not something we can just turn on and off. Like, you have this unconscious mind, whether or not you're aware of it. That's what makes it unconscious, right? So I'm wondering if the world of the online world, it creates a different dynamic. I guess it'd be hard to have a session with 540 people, harder maybe to have a session with 540 people in person, but you could do it in person. So
yeah, I am so glad that we found this online world of being able to have these type of meetings, because I can control the space better, and there's not a lot of body language to distract me for me to be reading. This it's the body language, the silence. But when you're on these type of calls and you got these little squares, it's less distracting for me as a facilitator, and so I'm now fond of this. But I'll be testing this out because I'll be flying to Vegas in July to do my first face-to-face since 2020, and so I'll get back to you and let you know.
that definitely sounds like exciting, and you'll bring all the insights and kind of the whole, I think our mindset has certainly changed with the pandemic and working from home and all that stuff. So it'd be really interesting to hear your story of this one, and it'll be interesting to think about a little bit of your anticipation of how it might go. But let's go on to the next slide. So Judith, I was going to ask you about online, but I'm going to ask you something else, which I think this could happen online or offline. This is topic 2 we were going to discuss. How do we deal with entrenched patterns of behavior and controversial topics within the group? And that could be a group that's online, a group that's offline, a group that's mixed. Do you have any ideas on that theme?
Well, in general, the first thing I would say from a process standpoint is seek first to understand in order to then engage properly in a conversation. I think that the 3 boxes that are up have more to do with, are there rules of the organization? Is there a code of ethics or a behavioral model which would cause you to intervene with a different intensity and sensitivity and early timing? The shades of gray is usually where most of the conflicts occur. It's not usually that somebody's proposing something that's definitely unethical. But I think that it's helpful if you can do it in a way that gives the person an opportunity to enter the exchange gracefully. So it frequently means, I'm not sure I see your point of view or understand it. Can you tell me more about it? It's an exploration approach, which tends to de-escalate rather than jumping in with, I totally disagree and you should be thinking this instead.
So this again, I'm gonna take the moment to hand it as directly as I can to Richard for his points of view there. So
sure. So I like that you started with a paraphrase of Franklin Covey's "seek first to understand versus to be understood." That's just a great way to be in to have collaboration. The other part, I think, with this entrenchment is that people will become entrenched, cognitively entrenched in decision making when they actually have pressure. And so relieving the pressure and showing cognitive flexibility to be able to look at the same problem, but for the first time, don't look at the same problem with the same solution, because that makes people frustrated. Look at the problem with a new set of eyes, or with a new solution. And so being flexible to be able to break that or dismantle that entrenchment is key.
Yeah, and I feel like that. So here's an interesting question: is like, how to put it, even noticing that there is a pattern. I think this is something we talk a lot about in the Peeragogy project is the notion of patterns and what is a pattern. We've written some of them down. So some of them are, for example, a newcomer, so like on this call, Richard and you and I have met each other most recently because I know Judith from a while, but you and Charlotte may go way back. And me and Charlotte go way back. So we're meeting each other on a different, we're new to each other in different ways. But the point is already in this call, you could get the perspective of someone new versus someone who's been there. I mean, and Judith and I don't know each other that well. We've spoken, less than a half dozen times, I think, prior to trying to set up this podcast. So in this sense, we're all kind of new to each other. But I was a new hire at this university. So again, with this issue of the codes, they may be there. I don't know what they are. But I think I'm trying to figure out about how you can kind of take the different perspectives that exist once we're here together and just identify them. Oh yeah, we've got different perspectives. Good. Someone's new. Someone's, and then we see, oh, actually, as you said, relieve the pressure. Oh, actually, I've noticed there's a sense of pressure. Oh, I didn't know that. There's a sense of pressure here. Yeah. So now we can see the things. You kind of have to surface the data almost first. Is that seems like you wouldn't know there was an intense pattern until someone mentioned it. The fish doesn't see the water it's swimming in, right? So.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking, and I think we talked about this yesterday. I come into group discussion, even one-on-one with my own team, with agreements. Beginning of the conversation. Here are some things that I think we should agree to. Do you agree? And really, focusing on I statements and really recognizing learn in turn. So let the person talk so that you can learn and making this, in a large group. I said it yesterday as well. If you're going to take space, then also be graceful and make space. And so that's how, again, if people are being held in these conversations, if people are being heard in these conversations, there's trust, and then we can move on and dismantle whatever that pressure is.
I feel like we're being told by the slides here we have to move forward with some diligence a little bit. So I think that but this is, I can just keep the energy rolling a little bit because one of the questions that occurred to me is we'll have different disciplinary experience and extra disciplinary experience. So it may be different to approach things as a chemist or as a rower or as a diversity consultant or as a, someone who long ago studied mathematics versus I'm not really sure what my job description is now. But anyway, so someone in the Peeragogy project, whatever. So I wonder, Judith, would you be interested to comment on, I think we chatted a little bit about the kind of topic of chemistry between people, but are there other things that you would say you bring your professional experience into a different context whatever? You see what I'm saying?
I think every individual brings their whole life experience to the situation that they're in, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. And it questions that help establish the connections are sort of, give me a little bit, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I'd like to understand some of the things that have influenced your viewpoints. Anything that's a non-threatening desire to learn more about the other person does a lot to de-escalate conflict and begin to build an area of potential shared understanding, which is actually then responsive to the question that was up, in the sense that if you want the group to participate, sometimes in a group setting, it's really good to just give everybody 1 minute to give I'm thinking initially this kind of statement, and then come back to those discussions. But by doing that, you've included everyone and given them a first opportunity, and then the flow will sort of take itself on its own.
That's good. Don't get lost in too early consensus, because I can imagine in the context Richard was describing, he might bring that energy of a lot of I statements, and you might be very happy if everyone else comes with their own position. Oh, I actually see it really differently. Here's my perspective. You might say, great. Now we have a bunch of different perspectives, and we can find ways to work together. On the other hand, that probably doesn't work very well if you're out on a rowing boat and people are not working in synchrony with each other. I live right by the river here, so I've seen them. They definitely have to be very well aligned. So I wonder if you can speak to that. How do you work with this? Yeah, sure, alternatives are good, but sometimes you really have to harmonize together.
Yeah,
The-
are you talking to Judith or me?
No, to you, Richard, please. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought maybe Judith knew about rowing too. So,
Not a lick.
if you're in one of the big boats, one of the things that the strongest person could actually be the weakest link in that boat.
Mm.
And so strong personalities in a trying to collaborate can actually disrupt that boat. It could actually slow down that boat. And so it's important to um, it's important to understand what the actual challenge going into the conversation. The reason why people have a difficult time with challenging conversations is because they're afraid of being vulnerable, and they're afraid of stepping in it, and they're afraid, and most of the times they're going into that conversation because it's about them protecting themselves. It's about, we have about 150 biases, right? And one of them is confirmation biases. And so recognizing that there could be confirmation biases, because a person's going to, even scientists may do this. Speaking of the scientists on the call, scientists will have a confirmation, but they'll keep only researching the things that confirm what it is that they have confirmed. And so that happens in group conversations as well. So recognizing that there is a such thing as confirmation bias, and being able to prevent that from happening by actually saying, I use this tool. So Joe, you may have just made a point, and I'll say to Judith, do you actually agree with his point?
Mm.
And begin to break that confirmation bias that may be happening in the room. In that group think. So breaking that group think.
Ooh, and that's another opportunity to get another voice in the conversation, but to do it in a way that's really meaningful. It's not necessarily, and again, if you're doing that openly and you're listening, you say, okay, yeah, he's made this point. It gives you a chance to assimilate that and think about it, maybe understand that perspective from yet another perspective, which is another thing you were talking about earlier. All right, so the slides are then telling, and I think we may be getting some questions or feedback. After this, I think we're going to bring in a panel to get some more perspectives from the production team behind the scenes right now. Yeah, what patterns can we use to achieve a productive outcome? So I think we talked about many of them. Let's see if we can reconstitute some of them just now. I'm thinking, seek first to understand. I'm also thinking about one of the things we said early on about all the things that have to happen beforehand, kind of the preparation and stuff like that. I see dignity and respect. In fact, I saw both of you had diversity, inclusion. Sorry, someone has diversity, inclusion. I don't know, something else, and respect, diversity, and something else. Yes.
Yeah, well, I've heard it go from diversity, equity, inclusion to then add
equity,
respect, and I'm blocking the fourth word. So,
but yeah, you've got two more than me, which is equity and respect. Yeah.
Well, I think the issue is really that you want to be treated gracefully. Every human being wants to be treated gracefully, and so that basic framework of teaching people with dignity and respect, that was the word I was hunting for, sorry. If you respect people individually for who they bring to the table and their qualities in terms of their personal dignity, they will feel valued. And if people feel valued, they will tend to be productive. I think what's important with a group, and it's either a one-on-one or groups, is that there has to be some base for forming that shared perspective of one another. And so taking the time at the beginning of an organization or at the beginning of a meeting to help the group refocus on what is it we're trying to do today. Has anybody brought some new experiences to this? Anything that's an engaging kind of question will help build a quality of the discussion.
Richard, would you be able to respond to that? And then I think after that, we're going to bring in Charlotte and Samara, perhaps, for a little broader perspectives. Yeah.
Sure. Two other words come to mind for me. People want to feel valued, right or wrong. they definitely, again, want to be heard. And the other one is they want to feel like they belong. And so as we form groups and we have these challenging conversations, even the person that has the strongest, even the person with the strongest argument that may not be the right argument, if they feel like they belong in the conversation and they don't feel ostracized and they feel like that they're being heard. And so one of my tools that I use to make that possible, one of them is that I'm not waiting, I'm listening, and I'm not waiting for my turn to speak. Secondly, I use an acronym called WAIT. Why am I talking? And just allow them to have that space. And then thirdly, for me, I always come into the conversations with this formula of creating awareness with true lived storytelling, education and historical facts, and then finally actions that people actually can walk away to say, I'm going to research that a little more, or I'm going to take this as a golden nugget and have a conversation over dinner with my partner. And so making sure that we have the awareness, storytelling, we have the education and historical facts, and then we have action steps.
That is so fantastic. Thank you. And I feel like this has indeed distilled much wisdom through the conversation. If we're able to have Charlotte and Samara join us, if they have a chance to just share one of their takeaways or thoughts, that would be fantastic. Here's Charlotte, who's brought us together, and Samara, who's helped make that all happen smoothly. So Charlotte, Samara, do you want to have some comments on what you've just heard? That was really, really fantastic. So
go ahead, Samara.
Oh, I mean, I was doing what you were all saying. I was listening, so I don't have much to say, but I enjoyed hearing these perspectives and thinking about how I can bring it into a workplace, especially as a younger member. Early in my career, different workplaces approach this differently. So I was thinking about how I can learn from this in my next role.
Yes,
yeah.
You just decided to have an action step.
Yeah, this is Charlotte. I'm the nominal producer of this podcast, but I have a difficult situation, family situation that I've been avoiding. So this partly was bringing this topic in as a podcast topic was I was hoping to get some practical, I'm just afraid to bring it up. I'm just afraid, because what Richard said about what was it?
they said you don't want to step in it at one point. I remember that.
Right. You don't want to step in it. And
the fear, the vulnerability piece. And so we don't go into these conversations because we are afraid of being vulnerable in these conversations. We are absolutely afraid of being weak.
Yeah. Yeah. And of not having the outcome be like I expect, the expectation of the outcome. And, but this is just like these, I think as we keep iterating this kind of discussion or research, we'll all be better for it. I know I am.
But I do have this for you, Charlotte. Sometimes we have to think about the person, how we're not allowing them to grow because we're not having a conversation with them. And so I think about what Brene Brown said: if we're clear, we're kind. If we're unclear, we're unkind. And so having those conversations and not being attached to an outcome makes it selfless, but looking for an outcome makes you selfish.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about that as well, as that we all tend to want to come out of these conversations with the right answer. And a lot of it's just about sharing and listening. And
Mhm.
the goal is really to just keep doing that. And that's somewhat uncomfortable because you just want, I mean, action, yes, but that action might just be have another conversation. It might not be change the laws or change the entire office culture overnight. And that's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah. And when in the past, when I've done this, when I've dive in and just go ahead and have it and have a accepting of whatever outcome, you always feel better. I don't know. I do. It's always a good thing. It's never as bad as, like you think it's going to be.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm taking away from this conversation is that part of the preparation that you would do in advance of a conversation is to create space. Yeah, unweave some of your expectations and let go of some of those expectations. Then it's not a matter of not having the outcomes be like the expectations, because you're not sure what you're you don't know what to expect anymore. So then you're a bit more open-minded. On that note, I wonder if we should we were going to go to a private call after this, but it's the semi-public, semi-private. So it's just on a different link. Charlotte, would you be able to bring that one up? I realize it involves hopping to a different platform, but it would enable anyone who was watching this to come join us, or it just could enable us to end this recording and carry on our conversation, because I'm sure we would love to
let me put it in a comment, and it's jitsi.com/
meet.jit.c/peeragogy. So that's MEET meet.jit.c/peeragogy. There we go.
All right.
Yep. Super. Yeah. So I do feel that we could carry on talking about these things quite a lot, but I also feel like, we want to go out there in the world and have these interesting, challenging conversations. I think I've learned also about the difference between a conversation that's difficult for no good reason and a conversation that's challenging but ultimately really rewarding. I think that reframes the whole thing for me. I don't see Judith right now, but I'm sure she'll be around if we can catch her on the after party. Tomorrow's dropped off. Thank you so much, Richard, and I look forward to hearing the news of your first
face-to-face,
face-to-face thing in Las Vegas. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, audience, and I'll see you hopefully on this new link for those who are ready to join us shortly.
So I have to go to that link.
Yep.
Yeah. I think Joe put it in the private chat too. So.
Oh, there it is.
All right. Yeah. I will wrap it up, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.